with violent offenders, typically it's often the case where often they've come from a home where violence was modelled to them as a way to sort of maintain control or affect your will or get what you want, or was normalised as a normal way to respond if you didn't like the way somebody spoke to you. And then, so they come from a family where that behaviour was modelled to them and normalised to them. And then, sadly, they're often in societies or have grown up in areas then where there's a high rate of violence as well. So that behaviour is then modelled to them also by the other people in their communities. I don't know if I'm being too specific now.
No, this is brilliant. No, yeah.
Okay. And then I think what happens is that so they start in the family home and it's modelled to them there. Then usually in, early adolescence, as we all do, our kind of world expands and we start to spend more time with our friends, rather than our family. So then this sort of violent behaviour is modelled to them by the peers in their area with whom they're friends. And it becomes something where it's the only way that the person knows how to resolve conflicts, that, okay, if you feel undermined or criticised or threatened by somebody, what you should do is give them a dig, and then if they give you a dig back, get out your knife and stab them and escalate it. Exactly. And it just escalates to the point where obviously people are just seriously injured and then they get charged with a criminal offence than a violent offence. So with the violent offenders, it's often about, I suppose, trying to communicate to them firstly that like behaving in that way can only escalate and can only end in a bad thing. Either you're going to get stabbed and get murdered or seriously injured, or else you're going to end up in prison for being the perpetrator in the situation. So if you can kind of get them to buy into the idea that, okay, escalation does not end well on any front, and if you can kind of get them to buy into that idea and agree with that, then you can start working on, okay, well, what else could you do if you feel threatened or criticised or undermined? Now that work is kind of two-part, okay? So you have the piece about what else could you do and giving them skills and about how to manage the situation differently, but also you need to go back into their early childhood and look at why they have those insecurities anyway. Why does, if somebody kind of teases them, why do they become enraged in response to that instead of just, firstly not being bothered by it at all, or B, if, kind of just laughing it off, what sort of core belief or wound is it kind of opening up, I suppose. So, so the therapy work is about trying to look at the different events that are causing them to be so kind of sensitive to criticism or undermining. And then the second part of the therapeutic work is, okay, well, what do you do now in that situation to not escalate it, So with the violent offenders, a lot of it is just trying to encourage them to sort of just, walk, things we all know already, I suppose, but walk away from the situation, don't give a smart comment back. Obviously, don't engage in any kind of physical aggression, and to remove yourself from the situation. With that, though, it's very difficult because often in these communities, you're seen then as by your peers as being weak. You're not being a hard man. You're going to be probably subjected to some kind of ridicule then for that as well. So you're trying to work with the person around, trying to kind of tolerate maybe other people having those sort of perceptions of them as well, So there's some kind of work to be done around that as well, to help them to see that it's sort of, that those people are only judging them in that way because of their own kind of experiences, from their own kind of childhood experiences. And it's sort of a mob mentality thing where everybody's feeding off each other,
Yeah. It reminds me of like theory of mind with children and stuff, to try and understand. And this is only something I've started to recently develop as a grown man, trying to understand that this person opposite me has all of their own version of what I have. They have all of their decades and decades of behavioural issues and environmental issues, and it's not necessarily an interaction between me and that person. It's my baggage interacting with their baggage, and my avatar interacting with their avatar. And for me, that makes it a little bit easier for me to do. Now, not that I'm getting fights or anything like that, but to not engage with the triggers or the baits or the.
This is it, yeah.
If I can see them as just a person who's responding to their own triggers, this is not about me and you. It's about your stuff and my stuff, and I can just separate myself from your stuff.
Yes.
And just take my stuff on my way and try and work on it. I can't imagine how difficult it could be, though, to work with people who have years and years and years and years and years of this, and you have a few hours with them over the course of weeks or months or whatever it might be. Like it's a lot of work and then this person in most cases is not in an environment necessarily conducive to change or growth.
Yeah, absolutely. And that definitely is probably the hardest aspect of the work as well, that they're, outside the hour that I'm there with them, they're going back to probably the very similar environment, so that's why, I suppose, unfortunately or fortunately, a big part of the work is often kind of cataloguing people they spend their time with and really asking them, okay, are they the best people to be around you in your life, and getting them to maybe recognise that those other people, as you say, have their own baggage and are on their own journey, and and maybe they're not the best people to have in their sphere of influence at that time, which it's kind of like what we do with people in addiction as well, people, places and things. What things are going to make you relapse? You need to get those things out of your life,
Okay.
So often with the work with these offenders is to kind of say, well, look, can you is this other person in your life kind of a positive influence or not, Now, what they might do is sort of like test the skills that they've learned. So if that other person is being confrontational, if the client is going to respond to them being non-confrontational, let's see, does that de-escalate the other person?
Okay. Yeah.
And if it does, then it's like, okay, well, maybe that person is okay to keep in your life, because they're going to respond to you being calm and collected and not escalating the matter. But there are other people, I suppose, who are just going to escalate things no matter what, So then, I suppose those people, unfortunately, are probably best not to be involved in that person's life, in the client's life, for a period of time.
Does it completely depend on the individual and the situation, or are there common approaches you found to be most effective? And like, the reason I'm asking this question is because I'm kind of put myself in this position. Are there approaches that I could potentially use myself when faced with triggers or conflict, or if there's a danger of me reverting back to a behavior that's not necessarily a positive behavior? In your professional experience, have you seen that there are certain approaches that work really, really well with a lot of people? Because you probably have a vast toolkit of things you could try and talk about and explore with clients. But are there like some common trends that you found working with specifically violent offenders that you kind of like, okay, well, this approach tends to work better?
I find it's often that self-esteem piece, actually.
Okay.
It's like, okay, if you can get the clients to feel secure in themselves, to feel like they like who they are and maybe what they've accomplished in life or what they're doing with their life, I find in that situation, then they're just far less sensitive to other people's kind of criticisms or ridicule. Then, because they just feel that they feel kind of confident in themselves, I suppose. So it's I guess it's that piece of healing the the pre-existing issues, I suppose.
Yeah.
I think going in at that level is actually gives you a more better long-standing results, rather than just saying, no matter what happens, just walk away. I think it's more about building that kind of more kind of bulletproof maybe mentality a little bit. That piece, and then the bit that you mentioned, which is a bit of education to them around, okay, well, why do you think that other person insulted you in that way? Why do you think that they're trying to kind of make you look bad or take the piss out of you? So then, my client would hopefully understand that that's just, because of their own baggage, and it's their own kind of defense mechanism or coping skill to make themselves kind of feel better, because that person has low self-esteem and probably hates themselves underneath it all.
No.